Cone dystrophy is a disorder that has an awful lot to do with the uptake of nutrients because of gastrointestinal involvement. And due to that, there's a lot of symptomology that may come along with it, like beta-carotene malabsorption. You don't digest it. So light sensitivity can come from it. Now, by consuming particular forms of no sugar or very, very low sugar juices, sprouts in particular, and green, leafy, fresh, organic vegetables, one can bypass the need to digest a lot of these nutrients through the gastrointestinal tract, going directly into the cell at some minor level. Due to that, one can possibly start to reverse things like light sensitivity. Now, we also understand from our experience with this is that DNA and chromosome can also be helped. And it's not going into this blindly, reading a book and just eating anything raw and vegan. One has to tailor this particular program to their own specific needs. And that can only be successfully done by a medical team sitting down who's steeped and experienced with this and make that process happen with you. It happens to be that we were invited to Russia shortly after Chernobyl and worked with some of the people who were there at the site. And what we found to be extremely effective is the use, copious use by the way, of freshwater chlorella algae as a supplement, blue-green algae, which we did not use there, but subsequent have used with radiation. Of course, coming from all of the radiation treatment that people have endured who have come through the program. As well as taking baths in kelp. Very hot baths in pure water, as pure as can be. Putting in a half a cup to a cup of kelp. Hopefully in this case it's Norwegian kelp, much more acceptable to go through the pores and reach. And this detoxification period that you have in the bathtub actually does help and has proven to help to take radiation out, which is uranium, by the way. Radiation, all radiation comes from uranium, which is a mineral. Many raw vegans, unfortunately, have a difficult time developing muscle because of the kind of raw foods that they consume. Most people tend to, because of your addictive nature and addiction, go to a lot of fruit. Now, fruit will never, ever really help to build the muscle in the way that it should. It's a fast metabolizer. It means it goes through the body very, very rapidly. It doesn't stay and doesn't help to, through protein, build muscle. So one should be going more on sprouted grains, which slow down their carbohydrates, that slow down the metabolism, sprouted beans, and of course preparations. Burgers, things of this nature made out of the beans, cookies with stevia in dehydrators, in both cases made out of the grains. And this is what we've used all the way up to helping Olympic level athletes work. This is what I personally used when I went from an obese guy to a very, very thin guy and then had to rebuild weight through weightlifting. And it was the sprouted grains and sprouted beans we did that with. At some level, at different times, sprouted seeds and sprouted nuts and the preparations in the same case that we would make out of those. Today, thank goodness, there's a wide array of healthy powders, protein powders, that one can consume. Sun Warrior is my preference because it's a fermented, meaning highly easy to digest, brown rice that's 85% protein. All of the common ones like soy are very hard on the body, almost impossible to digest, and switch hormones, feminizing men, masculating women. If you got sprouted peas and ate them, just like sprouted sunflower, green sprouts, basically these are very high in proteins. One green drink, which we consume at least 2 of here at Hippocrates a day, have half sprouted peas and sprouted sunflowers, and they have about the amount of protein the average Westerner consumes and digests in 3 days. So that's another great way to get it. And make sure that you're eating foods that don't rush through the body, and that's going to make it impossible for substance to be there and for muscle mass to develop. Orthorexia. This is a term from what this young person wrote me that said, Stephen Bratman, MD, of course from Colorado, came up with this term, thinking that anyone that eats a healthy diet must have some psychological food disorder. Well, he must be a chubette. Most of these guys are. They're always against what they need. I'd like to have a debate with the fine doctor on this issue. I'm far from a person with a food disorder. I'm sure that I had a food disorder when I ate the Western diet. That's why I was obese, angry, unhappy, and on my way to death. And of course there's going to be people in any venue of diet that are going to hide in there that are anorexic or bulimic. Nobody's going to suggest that can't happen. But I would highly advise that far, far more percentage-wise are hiding behind the Western diet and starving themselves of hamburgers than they are fine people who are trying to take charge of their life and eat well. So Dr. Berman, please, why don't you get over here to Hippocrates, or let's do it on the internet. Let's have a debate on this issue. I have an awful lot of experience I'm sure that you're not going to be happy listening to. Well, this is a very interesting question. I'm not sure it's from a sound person. How do you prevent being hypnotized if you don't want to be? Well, number one, if you know you're being hypnotized, you just say no. If you don't know, I think you need to go to see somebody to find out why you think you're being hypnotized. Over the 55 years that Hippocrates has been working with people, we've learned an awful lot about type 1 diabetes. And unlike type 2 diabetes, which we're very happy to announce, we see 100% of these diligent, serious people be able to reverse it, since it's a lifestyle problem. It's really not a disease like type 1 diabetes. Type 1 have at least some promising statistics compared to what is normally told to type 1 diabetics, that it's a chronic disease that requires medicines for the rest of your life. We find out of 10 people, 3 people have the ability to basically potentially reverse that disease. 4 out of 10 of the people with type 1 diabetes can dramatically reduce the insulin, so they have less chance of losing eyesight, limbs, neuropathies, the side effects that come along with long-term insulin. 3 out of 10, unfortunately, do not make much headway. And most of that group, but not in entirety, not all of that group, were generally born with type 1 diabetes. So I would certainly even say to that 3 out of 10 that it's much healthier to eat this way. It can only help, and I can't imagine it won't help to extend your lifespan too. Question once again goes back to a family who is concerned about radioactivity in the atmosphere. It's amazing that the public gets all riled up with the latest news report. How many of you out there know that we have been inhaling radioactive dust ever since the first Gulf War, the second Gulf War? How about your cell phones? How about your laptop computers? All of these have types of radioactivity that they put out. How about wireless? You have to understand that we are ever increasing the amount of radioactivity in our atmosphere and environment. With that said, by eating a proper Hippocrates-type living food diet, one is going to go a long way on preventing their bodies from breaking down and succumbing to these and creating tumors. On the other hand, the same answer as before. In my family, all 4 of my children, from the time they began eating at around 2 years old and stopped breastfeeding, they started to consume algae, blue-green and green algae, chlorella and blue-green algae. And little bits of that, depending upon their ages, until they're 15, and then they can take about the same amount mother and father are, is always going to help. The use of sea vegetables, either in the diet or taken supplementally, dulse, kelp, etc., can be helpful. Taking iodine directly, it would possibly be necessary in particular cases, but not as desirable as taking the sea vegetables that have iodine in it. Now let me preface this by saying that one of the greatest concerns I see skyrocketing today are thyroid problems. Because of thyroid problems, one better be checked by a competent healthcare professional, a physician, to see if they have hyper or hypo, fast or slow thyroid function. If so, you don't move forward by taking any forms of iodines or any forms of sea kelp, because it can acerbate, it can make the problem worse. So first find out if you have a thyroid problem. A competent physician will be able to help you with that, checking TSH and all the other things, free T3, free T4s, and hopefully they have good experience in this and they'll be able to then guide you. Here's somebody dear to my heart that lost 100 pounds. Congratulations, I know what it was like. I did it at one point. But she gained it back. And the problem is always when it comes to overweight or underweight. Again, weight disorders. We spoke about them briefly earlier. You have to know that this is all psychological. That why people are either obese, as I was, or people are too thin is because they don't like themselves. They don't love themselves. And if you do, then you eat properly. You eat a Hippocrates-type living food diet. You do exercise. I mean, today, for instance, I spent 3 hours at the gym. Why? Because I like it. And believe me, I didn't like it when I began it. I hated it. But I forced myself to do it because I know it's a good part of taking care of myself. And when you like your life, that's what happens. A lot of mothers that have babies, and in this case, that's what happened, the hormone shift. And a lot of women out there listening to me, they do not know that breastfeeding is a prerequisite to lose a weight on the side of your hips. There's a particular hormone that comes out when the baby's suckling that eats that fat away from your hips. Now, if you haven't breastfed for that prerequisite year and a half, 2.5 years, then that fat layer stays there, and it becomes almost, an insurmountable problem, although it is surmountable for women to lose that fat. Also remember this, eating raw food is not, I know a lot of chubby raw food experts, as an example, with big bellies. You've got to remember, it's exercise and it's what kind of raw food you eat. If your raw food diet is all fruit with high sugar content and all fats, you may be chubby. If you're not exercising, you're not going to burn that off. So you have to eat things that you're not going to like as much, because overeaters, as I was, only want fat and sugar. You're going to need greens. You're going to need sprouted grains, sprouted beans, nuts and seeds. And one of the tricks behind this, and we learned this over the years, if you're going to make sprout juice all day long, you're going to keep regulating your blood sugar, so you're not going to want bad food. But we won't do that. I'm sure nobody will do that unless you own a sprout juice company. So take the little algae pills and put them in a plastic bag, hopefully corn-based, in your pocket, in your purse. And whenever you want a candy bar, a piece of cake, agave syrup, a mango, all of these things we get our sugars from, basically take 2 or 3 of these little tablets, put them in your mouth, swallow them. Within 20 minutes or so, the blood sugar is balanced, so the desire, the edge for that addiction